Another stream with Tiger Games here. Hope your day's been absolutely positively freaking-tastic. Today we are going to do scary stories at the Quarry. And this is the Quarry. This is what most of you guys will be seeing while I'm streaming. Hey IXY. And I'm just gonna go ahead and jump in with the first story. If you guys are late to it, hopefully it'll still make sense to you. Remember to give that thumbs up button, guys, and yeah, you can't see it too well, but I'm getting a blister from where I got burnt. Yay. So I'm going to start with Hangman's Tree. Now, it's an urban legend about the we are currently at. And what it says is that on a Pacific night, at a Pacific time, the Hangman's Tree, you'll see somebody here who way back in the day got hung. And there's a noose placed in the tree to represent the moment that the person died. And if you come here at the right time, at the right place, usually it says around midnight, and it's usually in the fall when it was supposed to have taken place, you will hear a ghostly wail or scream and somebody saying, "I'm innocent," and you'll hear townsfolk screaming all kinds of things. It's supposed to be really creepy. But I wanted to open up with this specific story. It's kind of just an urban legend, may or may not be true. But we're going to go ahead and hop into some other ones. Hey, Solar. So the other scary story I have to tell you guys is called Lost in the Woods. It really happened to somebody. It wasn't at these woods, but I think that gives you a good example. Fuck that tree. So there was a group of people that was going on a camping trip up in Yellowstone National Park. And they were super excited. It was their first time ever there. And there was these two friends that were kind of going more sort towards like the boyfriend-girlfriend section. And during the first night, they snuck off and they had a little make-out session while their friends slept, and they returned. Nothing too bad happened that night. They heard like coyotes and wolves and whatnot howling in the distance. But it was on the third night that creepy things started happening. They started having rocks thrown at their tent. And the fire went out mysteriously one night and wouldn't relight. And they started hearing voices of people talking around their tent, calling out to them, would actually say their name and would say, "Help me." And one person of the group decided to go see who it was, to figure out who was throwing these rocks at their tent, who was making their firewood not light, and overall just causing mischief for them and freaking them out, especially at night when they were trying to sleep. And they said, "We'll be right back." They took the flashlight and they went out into the woods. And they went walking for several minutes, and they hadn't gone for more than 20 minutes from the campsite, and they hadn't seen nobody there until they turned around and realized that they were in a different part of the woods they had never seen before. And then they heard it. It was a bell, a loud ass bell. And their heartbeat started picking up super fast. They had no clue where this bell was coming from. And up to that point, they had never heard the bell. But it kept getting louder and louder and louder. And they knew that the bell or whatever was attached to it was like right around the corner. And they start running, and they're screaming at the top of their lungs for their friends at the campsite, telling them to run, to get out of there. But they could not find their way back to the campsite. They couldn't hear their friends, and neither could their friends hear them. For all intents and purposes, the friends didn't know where their friend went. They had hollered out in the woods. They didn't leave the campsite. It was getting dark at that point. But they hollered for them and tried to call their phone, and nothing would come through. Until finally a call went through and their friend answered. At that point, it had been hours. It was dark out, and it was starting to rain on top of that. And all they could hear was their friend breathing into the phone loudly. And before it cut off, their friend said, "Run for your life." And it went quiet. But they were still connected. And the friends were terrified at this point. They didn't know where their other friend was. They didn't know what was out there in the woods that had been tormenting them for several nights. They were just packing up, but they were still on the phone with their friend because the call hadn't completely cut off at that point. They just couldn't hear their friend. But then the last thing they heard over the phone call was the bell, the sound of the bells. And it went dead. The call just dropped. And the friends packed up their shit and they left. And they reported what had happened to the park rangers the same night. And they set out a search party looking for the friend. They found scraps of clothing miles away from where they had camped. So their friend, who thought they had only left for about 20 minutes, was a lot longer than that. He had somehow been transported a long further ways away from the original campsite. And the only reason they know about all of this is because the friend was filming all of this, and they would talk, and I guess it was a way to like prove whatever it was, or to keep their selves sane, because as it was getting darker, you could hear from their voice in the recording about how scared they really were getting. But besides the phone with the recording and little scraps of clothing on branches, they never found the friend. And he is still considered a missing person in Yellowstone National Park to this day. Much like the lore of the hanging tree. Affy's also joining us for this beautiful storytelling. So that was the story of Lost in the Woods. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. Now there's another one, and this one is the concern with Walmart and Mary in Ohio, where I live. It was a typical afternoon, and people were going about their day at Walmart, doing work, shopping, etc. And this old person, they were like in their 60s. My mom was working at this Walmart at the time, and they asked for help several times from people, but they were completely ignored. And it's a little bit sad about what happened, but they ended up having a heart attack by the baby aisle in Walmart. It was between the baby aisle and like the electronics section. And they sadly passed away before help could arrive. Now the scary part of it is that people has heard an old woman asking for help in this section of the store. And it would be like a whisper help, like it'd get real close up to your ear and it'd go, "Help me," right into their ear. And it freaks people out. And people who don't know the story about what happened there doesn't understand what's happening, but it still gives them chills and goosebumps on their arms and the back of their neck. And it's crazy. But there's been a few people that's come in to research, do the ghost thing, where they talk and do EVPs, I believe are called. And they've only gotten it once, but they've gotten it where an old woman answered and said, "Yes, I died here." And they believe that the person saying, "Help me," to all these people that walk through this Walmart is from this old woman. Pretty creepy, right? And there's another story I'm going to tell you guys. This one is about two campers who go off the beating path, kind of like, they go off and they explore their own little section of the woods. And they're used to doing that. They're backpackers. They go hiking in areas where you're allowed to go and hike pretty much where you want. And they were newly married, but they had been dating for several years. And they had went to this new area that they had never been before. And they set up this little campsite for the night. They were going to stay there for about 3 days. It had a beautiful lake with water rolling in, and it was just beautiful. This was also up near Wyoming, where this took place. And they were there for the first night. They had no problems. But then they kept hearing sounds of men laughing near their campsite. And they were in a little bit of a clearing, kind of like this, but with a little more trees around. And they were confused because they'd go and check around, around the area, and they wouldn't find nobody around. And they were completely mystified about what was happening. But they just assumed it was somebody playing tricks on them, and there was nothing to worry about. And they continued to stay there anyways. And this was just the first night. On the second night, it got a little bit worse. Sticks was thrown at them. And it hit their tent, and they were a little more scared at this point, because it went from just like laughter that was annoying and slightly concerning, but nothing too extreme, to sticks being thrown at them. And they weren't like little sticks, they were like big, thick sticks like that, thrown at their campsite. And the husband came out when the first stick was thrown and hit their tent, and he shouted, "Get the heck out of here!" Except it was more with like the F word, but I'm trying to be family friendly. And silence stopped. The stick stopped being thrown. They were hearing footsteps in the distance, not that far away from their tent, and those went quiet as well. An hour went by, and he told her to go ahead, go to sleep. He'd keep an eye out and just, make sure that it was safe. An hour went by. He was growing tired. Nothing else had happened. And then they decided to go to sleep. Well, he decided to go to sleep. And, he crawled in the tent with his wife, and he lay down on the air mattress and covered up, and he went to bed. Now, around 4 a.m., according to the report, he would wake up, And the sounds of men talking was like literally right on the other side of their tent, and he could see the shadows of them from the embers of the fire that was still going. And he charged out of that tent, and he was ready to confront the people and beat them up or attempt to. But when he got out there, nobody was there. There were no more shadows. There was no more voices. And that's when he decided, I'm not going to go to sleep for the rest of the night. I'm going to let my wife get her rest, and then in the morning we'll leave and go somewhere else. We'll leave and probably never come back to the spot. And morning came after no more incidents, and they started on their way back home from their camping spot. It would take them several hours to reach the parking spot of where they pulled off on the side of the road. And when they got to their car, all the windows were smashed in. The tires was slashed, and on the car was a message left written in yellow spray paint, and it read, "We are watching you." They were rightfully frightened at that point. People had been watching them, but they couldn't completely understand about the figures that he saw and the voices, because they never saw the physical person, although they saw the shadows. They heard laughter and the sticks were being thrown, but they could never find any people when they'd go out to like confront them. But the clear evidence of their car being with all the windows smashed in and those letters saying, "We are watching you," really freaked them out. And they had walked several miles in the wooded road, going down through these tunnels and roads. This wasn't really tunnels, but it was like the trees would cover the edges all around the road. And they didn't know where these people were. They didn't know these people had anything planned for them, but they couldn't use their car. The tires were slashed, the windows were completely broke, and they had no choice but to walk. And they eventually got to a small town at the end of this very long road. And from there, they were able to get a hold of the sheriffs. And to this day, they still have not ever found out whoever did it. So if you're ever in the Wyoming area, be careful, my friends, because they are watching you. Yeah, just a nice little hanging tree. I wish they would stop putting nooses in that tree. And another story that I'm going to tell you guys. This one is based off of more of a cryptid. And many people have heard about it. It's called Bigfoot. But have you guys ever heard of the Ohio Bigfoot? Now, Bigfoot community is really huge. Some of my facts may or may not be correct, because this is an older tale that I was told about. So, hopefully I get enough of the facts right. But if not, just think of it as a story. Yes, different camera angle. You want this one? So this is a personal story of mine, though. It really happened to me, and I hope you guys enjoy it. This one isn't too terribly scary, but when you're a kid and it's happening to you, it gets to you a little bit, you know? I was around 7 years old, and I was walking outside with my friend. We were walking near a cornfield, and out of the corner of my eye, I was able to see a creature. It was extremely tall, about 6 to 7 feet. It was super hairy. And instead of being smart and walking away, I convinced my friend to walk over in that direction with me. And we really got a good look at it. It was around twilight, the sun was setting, and it was probably coming out to probably eat some of the corn and whatnot. But it didn't see us right away. So I was mostly seeing the back and the side of it. I hadn't seen the face at that point. But when it turned back around, it had human-ish eyes. Like, it was semi-human looking, but the face was more ape-like. And the way it would walk, sometimes it would walk like a person, and other times it would be kind of hunched while it walked. Almost like it had like a hunchback on it, but it didn't. But when it saw us, it gave this loud screeching sound, and it took off running. And it moved faster than anybody I had ever seen run before at that point in my life. It scared us when it let out that scream. My friend fell back on their butt, and like, I started taking off, and then they were like petrified, and they were still back there, and they screamed my name, and a part of me didn't want to go back for my friend because I was terrified. And I eventually talked myself into bravery and went back for them, grabbed them, and we ran back to the house. And I was staying with their mother at the time, who was a teacher in my school. And we told her about what happened, and she didn't believe us. Did not believe us. So we just made a pact that we would never go back to that cornfield on that road ever again. And to this day, I still have not ever went back. It was scary for what was happening, but had I been older and now, I probably would have tried to go look for hair or something. But, you know, that's then, and this is now. So, you know, that's just how it was. Wait, I wanted to die? No light. I didn't want to die. No. It was just a freaky moment, you know? Now I'm going to tell you guys about the Lake Erie monster. I'm sure most of you guys have heard about Lake Erie. It's one of the Great Lakes of America. And I'm sure you guys have heard of the Loch Ness Monster, Nessie. Well, Lake Erie has such a monster as well. But it's not as documented as Nessie is, and it often goes overlooked. But if you guys have ever watched Jeremy Wade, you might have heard this. Oh, yeah. Jeremy Wade, who is in the show River Monsters, went looking for this Lake Erie monster. And his best guess in the thing was a white sturgeon, which is actually quite rare and an endangered species. But a lot of people disagree. They think it's a prehistoric monster that lives in Lake Erie and it just somehow survived. Now I'm going to tell you a tale that I got told when I went camping at Lake Erie by a fisherman. White detergent. White sturgeon. It's an actual fish. But So this is what the fisherman told me, okay, guys? And he also called it Nessie. And he's like, this is just the ancestor of Nessie. So Lake Erie, many, many years ago, when the colonists were coming in and, you know, colonizing the area, Lake Erie used to be connected to the ocean. And at some point, they would, when they were done with the Erie Canal and all of that, they would close up that portion of Lake Erie. And it would no longer be connected to the ocean. And that is when the appearance of the Lake Erie monster, or Lake Erie Nessie, first started appearing. Now, if you guys have heard any sailors' tales, you know how gruesome some of them can be and how frightening. And how some of them were actual real creatures, like the giant squid is an actual real thing. It's just you don't see them as often. But he told me this really happened to him. He'd be way out in the lake. Lake Erie is way bigger than this. You couldn't even see the other side. But imagine this is Lake Erie. And imagine there's just a small boat out there. Not that big. Just big enough to survive the waves that can happen in Lake Erie. And you're minding your own business. And you're just out there. And you're just fishing for walleye and other large species of fish. And you're having a good time. You're by yourself. It is completely sunny out. Blue skies everywhere you can look. And it's just an overall peaceful, nice day to go fishing. And then all of a sudden, your boat is hit from underneath. And you don't know what did that. I mean, there's no sharks in Lake Erie. There's no whales in Lake Erie. But something really big just hit your boat and bobbed it up out of the water enough so when it fell down, it would make a splash. And you're confused. You've been a fisherman all your life out there on that water. You grew up around the lake. And a creature that you have no clue what it is had just hit your boat up out of the water. You know for a fact that it wasn't your imagination because you're on your ass in the boat from how hard your boat was hit by the creature. And you have water on you, so you know it's real. And then another hit comes. But this time it damages the bottom of your boat and a hole forms. And you're taking on water. Now you're completely in panic mode. You're no longer in shock. You're in panic mode. You're out in the middle of Lake Erie. You have water coming in your boat. You're probably about 5 miles away from shore. And you go looking for your radio so that you can call Mayday. You can let them know that you're going to need help. And you realize for whatever reason your radio system is not working. And you're left there. So you start going, you look for your extra life jackets, you look for your inflatable boat. And then again, your boat is hit by that creature again. If you guys have ever been to Lake Erie, you'll also know that sometimes there are ferries, big, huge boats that carry people to the different islands, like Kelly's Island, for example. Well, one such ferry comes near your boat just in time, and you start waving your arms and screaming at the top of your lungs. They come over, they get you up onto the boat, and they connect your boat to theirs, and you get over to the main island after they drop off their passengers, and you explain what happens. Nobody knows what could have done that. And part of the people are thinking, well, did you do it? Are you just trying to get some publicity, some 5-minute popularity, some of that TV time, you know, make some money, moolah. And he swears that he did not. That he was attacked by a creature down in the water. He didn't see what it was, but it hit his boat 3 times in total. And on further evidence, after the cops look at it, it was indeed the angle of which the boat was hit was from below, not like from above. And everybody's scratching their heads at this point because to anybody's knowledge, even to this day in Lake Erie, the biggest fish is the white sturgeon. There is nothing that big in the water that could do that kind of damage. And there's press releases in the newspaper about the Lake Erie monster. And there's sightings of it occasionally. Like, it looks exactly like how Nessie is shown in pictures. But there's no concrete proof that there is such a creature. And to this day, nobody really knows. And that is the Lake Erie monster. You get attacked by laundry detergent? Oh my god, Kennedy. Oh my god. Yeah, he got attacked by that laundry detergent, you know? Kennedy, did we ever meet? We're going to tell stories just so that you can add your own little input about laundry detergent now. And now we're going to tell one more story, specifically about the quarry where we are at now. And give you guys a good view of the quarry. So this is the back side of the quarry. And on the other side of these is another side of the quarry. And the water is separated only because of this. And believe it or not, that isn't that thick or that wide. But there was one evening when there was a light right up here. And then another light, and another light, and another light. And it wasn't like a fire, although it was very bright like a bonfire would be. And the person was over here. People like to jump off of that cliff. They just jump and go bloop into the water. And there was a group. There was about 6 of them over there. And the story is called Light of the Quarry because of the eye testaments of these 6 people. 5 or 6 people. And they were jumping off the thing, and they would climb back up over these little rocks and then back up, and they would do it again. But they started seeing over here little lights of fire or whatnot just pop up. And they didn't look like they were attached to anything. So a couple of the friends would travel from all the way over here, and then there's a place right in here that you have to like jump over because there's like a drop point if you don't. And then they went over here, and when they got over there, all they saw were these little lights. They said they were about the size of a baseball, but they were super bright. But once they got up so close to them, all of them just went straight up into the sky. And it freaked all of them out, but mostly them, because they just were right there when it happened. They said it was warm, and the sound they made hurt their ears so bad they had to cover them, and even then it didn't completely stop the sound that they made. They would describe it that it was like a sonic boom, but they were so close it hurt their ears really bad. And it would take them several minutes to make their way back over to their friends, who was already packing up to leave. And they did not know what to do about what they saw. Do they tell people? Do they not tell people? Well, they ended up telling the authorities. And a few other people who live nearby said that they had saw lights shoot up in the sky, but of course they weren't like here where we could see it. They were way further back, way back that way. But their light was so bright that people over on some of the other streets nearby saw it. So it's called the light of the quarry, or just UFOs, guys. They saw UFOs. And that was the only point that the quarry itself has ever seen those, that has been reported and recorded. So guys, that is going to be it for scary stories at the quarry. I hope that you enjoyed the few that I told. If you want to hear more, and maybe I could go into more depths, into longer stories, just let me know in the comments, okay? And I will see you all next time. Bye bye.
We're going to that Bigfoot.